So, there are way too many books um, to choose from because I like a wide variety of books. But these are some of my favorites. Unfortunately, only a small fraction of my favorites, but they are some of them. You could consider this a nice snapshot of kind of some of the books that I really, really like. And if you're aware of any of these titles, you can kind of see the themes that I definitely relate to, ideas that I can relate to. And there's definitely a lot here: poetry, plays, philosophy, and plenty of novels. So I'm just going to do a quick tour of this brief selection or snapshot of my favorite books and a representation of me as an individual. So we'll start, of course, with America by Franz Kafka, which I think is a very incredible book, very picaresque as it's been described. Kafka's philosophy on life, his existential ideas, and thinking about absurdity was very interesting and is very influential to me. And not only that, Kafka is also a very good stylist. But of course, you'd have to also include A Clockwork Orange in there if you're thinking of modern classics. And Anthony Burgess, with his book A Clockwork Orange, really captured kind of the beauty of language in his Argot. And I thought it was very fascinating and very intense. And then there's another one that I would say is very dear to kind of my soul, I guess. It's a book called The Boy's Own Story by Edmund White, and essentially it's about this kid who realizes that he's gay, and he's not quite sure what to do with that, and it's about his adventures and his growing up. It reminds me a little bit of Catcher in the Rye, what with the sexual struggles, but it's a very intense and very beautifully written work. And I feel like all of the allusions to classic literature really enriches the novel. And stylistically, it's also a very well written book. And it's still tenderhearted though too, which is what makes it fascinating. I think what really stands out about the book for me is the fact that, um, sometimes people with homosexual tendencies are seen as like outcasts, but that doesn't stop the unnamed narrator from using his sexuality as a form of power. And I thought that that was interesting because he basically subverts society's expectations of just what they expect out of him. And I just think it's really remarkable. Um, but anyway, moving along, then there's James Joyce. It would be hard to not include James Joyce as in this list. It's a portrait of the artist as a young man. I love the Bildungsroman genre or coming of age, but in the context of James Joyce's book, it's definitely the Bildungsroman because it's about Stephen Daedalus's acculturation to society, and I just think it's really fascinating, especially considering when the book was written, because in my opinion, I see the book as kind of a rejection of classical art and issue bringing in and ushering in the new movement of modernism. And so I've always seen the coming of age story in this book of Stephen as kind of a metaphor for uh, acculturation into the new art movement of modernism and basically the new frontier and everything that um, calls into question. Then there's Hunger by Newt Hampson, another modernist work, or pre-modernist work if you wanted to look at it that way, about a starving artist. And, it's no coincidence that A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man is right next to Hunger by Newt Hampson. I'm obviously very fascinated by, um, I guess, what you could call portraits or self portraits of artists. And both of those books really inspire me. With these struggling artists that continue to do what they do regardless of what people say. And I just think it's really powerful, and it's a powerful testament to one's artistic spirit, to never give up. Another book I really like is The Story of Edgar Sawtelle. So I recently came out with my book Silent Noise, and in that book there's a character that's deaf and mute, And I have to admit that the story of Edgar Sawtelle really inspired my understanding of muteness in my book, Silent Noise. And I just thought I'd mention that because it definitely influenced my understanding of it, of muteness and kind of the ability to say so much by saying absolutely nothing at all. Um, then we have The Heartbreaking, a separate piece. I won't really go into too much detail about it, but it's definitely a heartbreaking story. Um, you know, uh, I don't want to give it away, but I mean, it's just sad, like what happens in the book, and I guess I really relate to it because sometimes I feel like, I myself have been betrayed in certain instances, and so I kind of understand that feeling, and I think what the book really captures is just the dark side of human nature, and it's sad that that's the way that we can be sometimes, but it's also reality, and there's only so much you can do about it. Um, but one thing that I thought was powerful about that book was certainly the fact that it doesn't end on a positive note, and I just feel like that really captures the human condition. Read the book and you'll know what I mean, I think. But anyway, then next there's James Hanley and his book Boy, which is as you can tell by the cover, it's really intense. I just think it's a heartbreaking book about breaking your back and getting nowhere for it. It's basically about a kid who has his own dreams and things that he wants to do, and how he does that despite what people say. And I think what's tragic about it is that no matter what he tries, it just makes his life worse. It doesn't matter how smart he is. It doesn't matter what he's capable of. It just makes it worse. And I find that really sad. But I think there's a lot of truth to it. But I do really appreciate the determination of that kid, of Arthur Fearon, that's his name, and just his determination to basically survive and to chase his dreams. Um, then, of course, there's a philosophy book by Foucault. Foucault's really influenced me. I'm very fascinated by philosophy of mind, and I think that this book hits a lot of really important points on the history of mental illness. And I would definitely recommend it if you're fascinated or interested in learning more about mental illness. Then there's a really beautiful poetry book that I read in um, Craig Dorkin's class called City Eclog. And Craig Dorkin is a professor at the University of Utah. And City Eclog is a very beautiful book. I love the juxtaposition between city and eclog, and it's just a very gentle very gentle collection of poems. Then there's the Tesseract. It's not labeled, but it's a beautiful story as well. I love the allusions to street kids throughout the book. I think that it definitely does a lot for this powerful novel, and I love the writing style, the structure. Structurally, the book is very, very unique, and I feel like it captures kind of the idea behind the Tesseract, and I would definitely recommend that as well for its grittiness and its rawness. I don't really have much to say about When I Found You, just that I recently read it. It's a recent hit that I've kind of really appreciated, and I just also love its theme of determination. And again, it's one of those heartbreakers. I really, really wish that I didn't read such heartbreaking works, but I think that I'm attracted to them because I can relate to them so much. You know, um, because sometimes I see myself as somebody that walks around with a broken heart, and I used to think that that was a bad thing, but now I've just kind of understood that that's who I am. Then there's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. As you've seen, madness and insanity is definitely a theme that I think about a lot. But I feel like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is a very good book that exemplifies kind of the corruption behind people that try to control people that are considered insane. And I'm sure many of you have seen the movie and you kind of know what I mean. So yeah, we'll leave it at that because it's a classic. Then there's Skipper by Stefano Bini, and I'm sure like that's a book that a lot of people haven't heard of, but Stefano Bini is actually pretty popular in Italy, and it's just a very lighthearted tale. It's kind of a vulgar book in some instances. There's some stuff I wasn't quite a fan of, but the voice of the book of Time Skipper and his enthusiasm for life is remarkable, and so it's definitely one I would recommend. And as you can tell by the cover, it's very, very lighthearted. You know, kind of the idea of chasing your dreams, you know, staring intently at that soccer ball. But anyway, then there's The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. Not much to say about that. But if you read my book Silent Noise, it's probably the most referenced work, poetic work, at least modern work, with the exception of the Divine Comedy in Silent Noise. And there's probably a reason for that. If you haven't read The Wasteland, then please read it, and you'll see why I like it so much. Then there's a really beautiful book called That Swim Two Boys, very inspired by James Joyce's writing. That Swim Two Boys, and basically it's about these two boys that fall in love, and it's just a really powerful testament to the human condition and to love in general. You know, I was really impressed with the way that it handled sexuality. It wasn't explicit really, except for one scene that actually I wish wasn't in there, but that I understand why it was in there. But the relationship between the two boys is actually very it's more sensual rather than sexual, and I feel like because of that it definitely exemplifies like kind of my conception of love, and how I kind of see love as just this very gentle force, and I just like that, and I think it's really powerful. Then there's The Wild Things. Gotta love Crazy Max. I mean, Max, the character, has inspired my own character Maxwell in my novel The Street Kid, which I hope to release eventually, hopefully next year, in 2015. But yeah, I mean, there's not much to say, but Dave Eggers' version of The Wild Things is very beautiful. And of course, nothing could replace Sendak's version, but I don't know. I mean, Eggers' version is very good. And it reminded me a lot of the movie, but I love the movie too, so I don't know. So we'll see. Then there's The Talisman. And I read this when I was a kid. And I've just always liked The Talisman. I think Stephen King is an incredible writer. Even if his fame is overblown. And I think The Talisman is probably his best work. And I mean, it's certainly the writing is really, really rich. And certainly, yeah, I mean, it's just about a boy, Jack Sawyer, who wants to save his mom. And I just think it's a really powerful theme. And, and I just think it's cool, the things that he goes through. And I feel like the imagination is amazing and unrivaled in this book. But anyway, to get to poetry, there's Rimbaud, his book A Season in Hell. Don't really have much to say about it, but I love it. I probably should not read books that are like about being stuck in hell, when sometimes you feel like you're stuck in hell, but I mean, what do? You know, you just do what you can. And I think the same thing can be said about Artaud. He was a very, Antonin Artaud, he was a very troubled individual, but he wrote brilliant, brilliant poetry. And it's just very intense. My favorite poem by him, in fact, is, I think it's called Van Gogh, the Man Suicided by Society. I think it's a very powerful testament to visionaries and visionaries who are misunderstood, reminding me a lot of Holderlin, and thinkers like that, tortured thinkers like that. And last but not least, there's the play Equus. I love its handling of sexuality in the play. I don't necessarily like the explicit versions that I've kind of seen excerpts of, like online and stuff. But the play isn't very suggestive, and yet the lack of suggestiveness really adds to the power of this book. I think that what you'll notice about all of these books is kind of just this desire for really, really intense and deep compassion and love for people. And I mean, in Clockwork Orange, obviously not necessarily, but I mean, and just kind of the hardships of living, you know, but the fact that, you know, life can break your heart, but that, you know, if we have each other, then we can be okay. And, you know, there's definitely a theme of the tortured individual throughout it. And there's certainly a reason for that. But I don't know. I guess in the end, you do what you can. And I honestly strive to be the best artist that I can be. And even though this is a brief snapshot of the books that I really, really like, I hope it gives you a good taste. So yeah, this is Phoenix, and thank you. Thank you for listening.